So while the Bloodwave build was by far and away the most powerful Necromancer build for Season 7, in Season 8, with it seeing a severe nerf, one of the other and one of my favorite builds is finally coming to the forefront, and that is the Blood Bone Spear Necromancer. And with it actually being the main build I played throughout Season 7, I think I can speak a little bit to it. So first of all, the reason that I like it so much is its versatility. Namely, you can actually focus really hard on single target and boss killing by using a sacrifice version without any minions, and since your Bone Prison allows you to guarantee overpowers, you can actually kill bosses really fast that way, or even use it to say push pits. If you wanted to, you could also switch into a more speed farming, also even like hands-off version, where you're almost like semi-AFK, because if you just juice up your Bone Mages, which will then shoot Bone Spears, right? Just give them a little bit of sustain, and actually just run around the open world and allow your Bone Mages to do a lot of work for you. So starting off with version 1 of this build, which is without minions. So as you can see, all of my minions have been sacrificed for additional bonuses, and this version is especially useful for not only killing bosses, especially with Season 8's boss ladder, this should be really useful for that, or perhaps pushing hits. And by the way, before we actually get started, I also want to mention that the Bloodbone Spear Necromancer is actually quite easy to start up. You don't really need any like difficult to farm gear or like high rolls on aspects or specific uniques. Even before you get Indira's memory here, you can still run kind of a regular Bone Spear build for until you get it, right? And in fact, it's also fairly easy to obtain. All you need to do is to farm up the Beast and Ice. And the reason that it's easy is that you don't really necessarily need like an ancestral version of this. You kind of just need like the very basic version, because you're not looking for like a high roll on one of their bonuses, right? As you can see, the roll primarily benefits Bloodwave, but this is irrelevant for this build. You only want the Bone Spear effect that converts it into a blood skill, and by the way also drains life from you. So this is actually not like a numerical roll, this is just an effect. So just having the most basic version of Indira's memory, for example just by killing Beast and Ice in Torment 1 to get this, shouldn't be too difficult and will be great for starting off on this build. But one of the main things you will want to do is after getting this unique, you'll want to have some way to sustain your health, right? Because it will start draining your health in addition to your resource. So you'll want ways to essentially heal up. Obviously you have Doombreeder here, which can help a lot, but it is by no means necessary for this build. And especially in Season 8, there's going to be some boss powers, or one like boss power modifier that'll allow you to get some healing as well, and we'll touch on that a bit later. But as for the skill tree, since you've converted your Bone Spear to a blood skill, you can also utilize something like Transfusion to allow your blood skills to give you a bit more blood orbs, which of course when you pick up blood orbs it heals you as well, right? So perhaps just allocate a couple of points into Transfusion here, which I don't have right now because I already have Doombreeder and other ways to heal up, but there's definitely some adjustments you can make on your skill tree to get some healing. So Transfusion is the first one, and then you can also optionally use the Blighted Corpse Tendrils to spawn even more blood orbs for you to pick up to heal yourself. And with these core mechanics out of the way, let's get into some of the skill tree choices for this build. So obviously I am maxing out Bone Spear and getting Supernatural Bone Spear to give me additional overpower damage. This is really strong because it can combo with your Bone Prison while also using the Bone Duster's aspect, which states that whenever you have enemies in Bone Prison, you're guaranteed to overpower them and will also deal additional damage to them. So this is one way to get a huge multiplier on your damage. Going back to skills, a lot of it is pretty standard, so I'm not going to go through every single point. But notably, I do have Blight over here to deal some additional multiplicative damage, which is especially good for bosses and just single target damage, right? And this also benefits me because by having an additional darkness spell on my bar, I can also use Reaper's Pursuit, which will give me additional damage and movement speed. Moving on, of course, we have Bone Prison. I prefer having Dreadful Bone Prison, but it's kind of a playstyle option. Before you have more Essence Sustain, you can also get like Ghastly Bone Prison for, more Essence. Moving on, we do have Decrepify here, but this is comboed with the rune where I'm able to trigger Decrepify without having it on my bar, right? But by speccing into it, I'm also able to lower my cooldowns. Here I also have Corpse Tendrils. I only have 1 point here, combined with the aspect of Grasping Veins. Moving on, another major skill to have is Soul Rift. Here I have some of these sacrifice bonuses. And for the key passive, I am running Rathma's Vigor, Paragon, and again, for sake of time, I'm just going to run through my main glyphs. So I have Essence for additional critical strike damage, and this is helpful because by really adding more dexterity to this to scale up my critical strike damage, it synergizes with the Deathless Visage, which will give you Bone Spear additional damage, scaling with your critical strike damage too. Getting back to my Paragon tree though, my second main glyph here is Sacrificial, and this is again for the version that I'm running without mages, right? If I do run mages, I'll obviously swap this out. And then Corporeal is the next one, dealing additional physical damage, and then Dominate for overpower damage, and I am overpowering very consistently. And then last but not least here, Illuminator for additional damage to elites. For the main Paragon boards that I've gone with, of course we have the starter board, but next we have Bone Graft because Bone Spear will still be a bone skill. Next board I have is Bloodbath. It's also a blood skill and will benefit greatly from overpower, so this is extremely powerful here. Down here we've got Flesh Eater. This is kind of like a good all-around legendary node for lots of different builds because you're consuming corpses by using the Indira's memory here to consume corpses from your bone spears. Last but not least here, we also have Frailty. Again, I have a rune to trigger Decrepify, which will allow me to deal bonus damage to them. Now going through gear really fast, I've already mentioned the Indira's memory being basically core to this build, and then Deathless Visage being really good. For some other stuff, it's actually kind of standard. I have Hardened Bones aspect for defense, Sacrificial for, benefiting from sacrificing my minions. Path of Trag'Oul is also pretty much you want because you're casting Bone Prison, and then this will give you more essence, and also plus the bone skills and reduce your bone prison cooldown. Doombringer is kind of optional. You can definitely replace it if you don't yet have it with something offensive or even run a two-hander. For instance, a popular choice is to use the Great Feast aspect. Just make sure that you have enough essence generation, which you usually will, and I'll get to how to do that. Anyhow, I have Doombringer plus Cadavers here, which is actually pretty strong. So this is yet another good aspect you can use offensively. Going to the Amulet, I have Dark Dance. It allows you to deal extra damage whenever you consume life. Next, we have the aforementioned Bone Dusters. And then last but not least here, we have Grasping Veins. As for the attributes, I have a lot of critical strike damage, and also attack speed is actually a huge one. Critical strike damage is good because numerically it goes up really high. And then notably for your jewelry, you'll definitely want a chance to restore primary resource, because this will be one of your primary ways to, no pun intended, sustain your resource costs. Alrighty, and now switching over to the speed farming mage build. Here, instead of course sacrificing my mages, I am sacrificing the other two while keeping bone mages, because of course bone mages can cast bone spears as long as it's on your action bar. And this will allow you to kind of play a bit more hands off and just have more like AoE damage, but just having less bone spear damage compared to the sacrifice version, right? But again, if this is a speed farming build, that's kind of what you might want to go for anyway. So as for some of the changes here, of course, the skills, I'll have to swap out the sacrificial stuff and go into mages. So I do have Skeletal Mage Mastery here to increase your damage and life. I took out the sacrifice related passives. And for Paragon, of course, I'm also swapping out of Sacrificial to go into just something standard like Amplify, which I haven't finished leveling up here, but Amplify is good, just like a consistent damage increase, useful for many different builds in fact. As for gearing, most of it is the same. For my chest piece, I've swapped out Hardened Bones for Occult Dominion to get 2 additional Skeletal Mages. For gloves, you probably don't want to use Sacrificial anymore, although you would still benefit from the bonus for your Skirmishers and Golem, but it's probably not worth it. You would instead want to use one of these offensive aspects, such as Grasping Veins is probably a really good choice. And the reason I don't have it equipped right now is because for my ring, I've also swapped it out to Sacrilegious Soul. I think this is extremely helpful, especially when combined with the skill here, where whenever you use your Skeletal Priest, you're healing, which is down here, right? Bonded in Essence, you're also healing your skeletal or your skeletons. And I found that this is actually very crucial because look closely at the Bone Mages, they actually consume their own life whenever they cast spells. So if you don't have this level of sustain on them, they're actually gonna die really quickly, and you'll just have to like keep recasting and resummoning them. So having the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul here I think is essential for the speed farming build because it'll not only help you top off their health, but also allow you to quickly resummon these skeletons automatically should they die. And of course, a nice bonus is that it'll help you cast Corpse Tendrils automatically, and if you even combo that with more consistent vulnerability here, or if you want to swap over to the Blood Orb spawning for more healing, those are also really good choices. Last but not least, just to touch on the new Season 8 boss powers really quick, and the reason I'm not going to spend too much time on this is that they were actually nerfed pretty significantly after the PTR, and on the PTR, a lot of these boss powers were quite dominant and to the point that some builds could just be built around them, but that is mostly not the case anymore. Anyhow, just to go through some of the most useful ones at a glance, I would say that Lord Seer's Blood Pool. Oh, and by the way this works is you can equip one main boss power, so it's one main boss power plus 3 modifier powers. So the 3 modifiers are just ones that activate as, or just sort of grant passive effects whenever your main power is activated, right? So for your main power, I don't really think there's one that clearly stands out. Perhaps the Law of Bonds, because it actually reduces your ultimate skill's cooldown. Maybe Winds of Hate might be pretty good here, the Lilith's Wind of Hate. But anyhow, as for the modifier powers, which again are the ones that gives you like the secondary effects, I would say that Lord Seer's Blood Pool is going to be quite strong because again with the Blood Bone Spear version of it, you actually are draining your maximum life whenever you're casting spears, right? So you do need that life sustain, and this modifier, because whenever you activate your boss power, it heals you, you'll want to pair this with a boss power that activates frequently, and that'll allow you to much more easily top off your health. Aside from that, you can kind of just pick some of the ones that give you damage. I think Horus Rage that gives you attack speed might be quite good because attack speed is valuable for this build. But you can really pick ones that kind of shore up some of your weaknesses while you're progressing your character as well, right? For example, if you need some like more resource, or if you're a speed farmer, you can pick Wandering Death's Chest Beam as a modifier because it gives you primary resource whenever your boss power executes enemies. And I would say that another one that really stands out is Belial's Eye Beams for the modifier, because whenever you activate your main boss power, it not only gives you unbreakable stealth, which can also help with like survivability, but more importantly perhaps, it allows you to deal extra overpower damage whenever this stealth activates. So with you consistently overpowering with this build, I would say that this is probably one of the main damage oriented boss modifiers that you want to go for. And here as well, Harbinger of Hatred's Volley. The modifier seems quite strong too because it straight up gives you 31% multiplier to your vulnerable damage. And with like Bone Prison and perhaps Corpse Tendrils, if you spec into it, you actually have pretty easy and on-demand ways to also make enemies vulnerable. And that is pretty much it for my quick overview of the Season 8 Blood Bone Spear Necromancer. Again, when it's ready, I will be sure to put up a character planner in the description box below. And also let me know if there's anything you would like me to clarify or if there's anything else you would want to add, and I will be sure to reply to every single comment. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing to my channel for more cutting edge guides just like this one. And with that, I will catch you in the next one. Happy hunting. Peace.